In Stanley Kubrick's movie The Shining, we see this very odd and disturbing scene that now feels a little bit normal because of the advent of furry culture, but it shows that there's a connection between Eyes Wide Shut and Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining, and maybe this is why Stanley Kubrick chose to adapt this film in the first place, because it is very different from his other films. Towards the end of the film, we see that Wendy's running around the Overlook Hotel, and she starts to actually see the ghosts that are present in the hotel. She looks in a room and sees a man in a dog costume on his knees over a man in a tux. The movie doesn't even attempt to explain who this person is in the dog costume, nor the man in the tuxedo. But I think the reason that Stanley Kubrick chose to leave this scene in the film was to act as a breadcrumb of the abuse that the rich enact on men, women, and children. And that idea is further explored in Eyes Wide Shut, as I show in my Eyes Wide Shut, the letter theory videos. But when you read the book, as I did for the first time last week, this man in the dog costume is actually explained in the book, and there are far more scenes with him. And this character in the dog costume, Roger, really highlights the dark and disturbing past of the Overlook. Over its history, the Overlook was a place that had a lot of instances of violence, trauma, and abuse. Part of the reason that this happens is because of the Overlook's ability to feed off of the trauma and energy of other people, especially those who can shine. But a large part of it was that the Overlook was actually ran by a criminal enterprise, and they would throw Eyes Wide Shut style parties. And they described this in the book, and this is completely cut out of the film. But there is an implication in the book that these parties weren't just abusing men and women. So earlier in its history, the Overlook was owned by mob bosses and those who ran these giant criminal enterprises and were notorious for that. And there was actually assassinations done inside of the Overlook. In the presidential suite, Danny gets a vision of a very powerful man and his two bodyguards who were assassinated inside the presidential suite. And later in the book, Jack finds newspaper clippings that talk about this. And when Jack finds all of these newspaper clippings, one of the notable criminals who ran the Overlook Hotel and owned it was named Horace Derwent. And those who know him closely would call him Harry. He would have meetings for the rich, powerful, and the connected. It's even said in some of the articles that presidents were staying at this hotel while these crimes and these parties were taking place. And in the book, as Jack starts to lose his mind, as the Overlook is slowly corrupting him and taking him over, he actually starts to see visions of these parties. And in the movie, we still get remnants of this. Before Jack attacks Wendy, he's in the cocktail lounge drinking with the ghost bartender. There's a party going on around him, as we see in the film. But unlike the movie, in the book, this is actually a masked party. And there's this reoccurring countdown to midnight. And at midnight, everyone will remove their masks. And that's when Jack gets fully taken over by the ghosts and goes on his rampage. But up until this point, they're heavily drinking, having affairs, dancing, and humiliating the man in the dog costume, Roger. In the movie, we see that in room 237, there's a woman in the bathtub. Originally in the book, this was room 217. And this female ghost, Jack actually meets and dances with her at this party and sees what she looked like when she was alive. And her partner is Horace Harry Derwent, the man who owns the hotel and runs these criminal enterprises. While Jack dances with her, they start to get a little inappropriate with each other, and she invites him to go off to have an affair with her. And she says that although she is with Harry Derwent, that he's busy and he won't care or notice that she's even gone, because he's distracted with Roger, the man in the dog costume. His costume is described as having a flowing silver material in the back, and that the face is made out of something like paper mache, and it's frozen in a snarl, and it looks somewhere between a dog and a wolf. And that's when the woman from room 217 tells Jack that Horace Harry Derwent is actually bi. Now, she uses a code that they used to use back in the day, which was calling him AC/DC. And using that same code, she implies that Roger is gay and that he had an affair with Horace Harry Derwent. She then says that Roger wants to be with Harry again, but Harry only sleeps with men one time. And so ever since, Roger has been following Harry around, desperately trying to get him to have a physical relationship with him again. So Harry then tells Roger that if he dresses up in this dog costume and comes to this party and acts like a dog and takes requests from the people at the party, he'll consider sleeping with him again. You understand that this is not a joke. This is very much a kink, and a very abusive one at that. So the party guests tell Roger to sit, speak, and even lap up champagne that spills all over the floor accidentally. So they're treating him cruelly like a dog. And then it soon turns torturous. Harry starts holding some of the appetizers over Roger's head and telling him that he has to do a somersault for the treats. And at this point, Roger is already exhausted because he's been doing tricks for everyone at the party that's been requesting them. So when he attempts to do the somersault, he can't fully do it, and he lands hard on the ground, clapping his head on the tile. And then Harry tells him to do it again, and he does and hits his head again. And then the crowd starts chanting for him to do it over and over, even though he is hurting himself in the process of trying to do this somersault. This is very much them torturing Roger. And Jack watches this for a few moments, and it makes him feel so sick that he actually walks out of the room. And as he's leaving, he can hear people still urging Roger to do more tricks for them. But the next time we see Roger, we understand that not only is he willing to hurt children, that he probably likes to. And that maybe the other people at this party are okay with it as well, because we saw how torturous they were with Roger in his costume. As the hotel is slowly manipulating Jack and taking him over, the Overlook Hotel becomes more powerful. It starts showing the ghosts and these other hallucinations to people to keep them away from interfering with their takeover of Jack. So at one point, Wendy is sleeping and Danny's in his room in the Overlook, and he starts to hear a voice that sounds like his father's, but he knows it's not his father, and it's somebody mimicking him. He chooses to go out into the hallway to investigate where the sound is coming from. And when Danny gets out into the hallway, Roger, the dog, is there, blocking him from getting near his father on the other side of the hotel. And when he sees Roger, Roger's on all fours, drunk and snarling, and his teeth are stained from blood. Blood covers his mouth and chin, and it's described that the way that his dog costume is made, that there's a zipper that runs up the back to his neck, implying that he can't even get out of this costume by himself. He's trapped inside of it. And he's been in this costume so long that he is sweating and overheating, and through the eye holes, you can see that his hair is actually matted to his face with sweat. And Roger, on all fours, starts growling at Danny, and this growl is very much a human trying to replicate the sounds of a dog. And Roger starts threatening Danny, and he tells him that he's going to eat him, but first he's going to start with his plump little, I can't actually read this out loud, and obviously this is a very disturbing line, but Danny in the story is only 5 years old. And at other moments, we understand that he barely has concepts of genitalia or what they really even do. So it's very odd for him to say this, because he could have just said that he would eat him, and that would have scared Danny. So him making this threat of what he's going to eat first is a choice more than it's to scare Danny, implying that Roger's not making this threat to scare him as much as it's something that he wants to do. And it's scary because he already has blood on his teeth and his chin and his mouth, and we don't know where that blood came from. And Danny ends up running away from Roger. And then Roger starts making these horrible barking sounds. He can still hear Roger out in the hallway, and Roger's yelling to somebody that's not there. He's speaking to Harry Derwent, but referring to him as Harry, as did Harry's partner, the woman from room 217. So obviously he has a very intimate connection with him, and Roger starts complaining about Harry not being able to get it up. He doesn't care how rich he is and how much he owns. He's gonna provide Harry with what he knows he likes. And then he refers to being a wolf, that he's gonna huff and puff and blowing Derwent down. So he just went from making that disgusting threat to Danny to talking about blowing down Harry Derwent. The things kind of feel connected. But this threat that Roger makes to Danny is not an isolated incident. Throughout the story, the hotel reenacts the pain that it has seen before. But the threat that Roger made to Danny might be a recreation of things that have happened at the hotel in the past. And this is not the only time that the hotel uses this kind of perversion and violence to scare Danny. In a later scene, Danny finds a wind-up clock that has a glass dome over it. And this clock has actually been there in the hotel since the masked parties, in the exact same room. And we know that because Jack sees it in his hallucination when he starts to see the party guests. And so Danny takes the key and he winds up this clock. And a feature of this clock is when you wind it up, it sends out two little mechanical figures. But we're unsure what originally these mechanical figures were supposed to do, because the Overlook can change what happens and what the mechanical figures are and what they do depending on who's using it. So after Danny winds it up, a small mechanical male and female ballerina come out and they start dancing together. But soon they start performing adult acts on one another. As it's described, the male ballerina puts his head under the female's skirt. And because Danny's 5 years old, he describes what he's seeing in the book, and he refers to it as, and seeing this makes Danny feel sick, but he doesn't really know why because he's so young. And when the hotel makes the clock do this, it could have made it do anything. It could have showed him any kind of scene with these small mechanical figures, but it chose to show him this. And we know this because in a later scene, Jack interacts with and winds up the exact same clock, and it does something completely different. When Jack winds up the clock, he sees two mechanical figures come out, but it's a man and a small boy. And as they come together in the middle, the male figure then proceeds to pull out a mallet and start to bash the child until the entire glass dome is coated in blood and you can no longer see inside. So the Overlook chose to show Jack that because it wanted to get him to take Danny's life, so that Danny would be a part of the Overlook and it could permanently feed off of his energy, becoming more powerful, and it would be able to hurt more people. So it makes you wonder, why did the Overlook manifest the scene that it showed Danny? Why did it make the ballerinas do that instead of physically hurting each other? It's almost as if it wanted to show him this adult content for some reason. Which is just like with Roger the dog. Why did he say that to Danny? The hotel is choosing to describe and show this abuse to him. And I think this is implying that not only were adults being abused at these masked parties and in the hotel in general, but children might have also been as well. And there's another point in the story where it seems as though there is this aspect of child abuse. Because in the book, when Jack goes and smashes the radio, he does it while he's sleeping. He is actually having a dream, but he's walking around the hotel acting it out. And in the dream, he's hearing his father's voice coming over their CB radio telling him to take the life of his son, echoing one of the terrible crimes that his father committed to his mother at the dinner table when he was a child. So in this state, while Jack is sleepwalking, he proceeds to destroy the radio before waking up. And at the same time this is happening is when the woman in room 217 is attacking Danny, leading Wendy to think that Jack had hurt Danny in his sleep. But later on in the story, Jack has another nightmare, and when he wakes up from it, he is standing nude over his son sweating, and he doesn't know what he's done or what he was going to do. And I think that all of these things in the book are supposed to imply that there was some kind of child abuse going on inside the hotel that's not specifically mentioned. And I think that's why Kubrick left these remnants of it by including the dog scene in the film. Because leaving Roger the dog and Harry Derwent in the film points to the fact that they were having these masked rich parties where they were abusing people, which is very similar to Eyes Wide Shut, where he shows that there are rich people and they are abusing people that they bring into these parties that are also masked. And like I talked about in my Eyes Wide Shut video, we know that there's a connection between the masked parties and the rainbow fashion, where we see that Milch is selling an underage girl and providing costumes for these parties, which in Eyes Wide Shut is further connected by the fact that in Eyes Wide Shut, we see that the password to get into the party was Fidelio, but originally in the shooting script, the password was Rainbow Fidelio, which again connects these parties back to the rainbow fashion. And Kubrick made this much more apparent in Eyes Wide Shut than he did in The Shining. But I think that leaving this remnant of Roger the dog and Harry Derwent in the story was his way of calling out how these rich and elites will throw these parties and create these situations where they can abuse people of all ages. And I think that in The Shining, he was hinting at it, and in Eyes Wide Shut, he was much more bold and showed the connection. And then Eyes Wide Shut was his last film. And for some people, this might seem like a stretch, but I would ask you, why include Roger and Harry Derwent in the movie when they never explain what's going on and you only understand if you go back and read the book? I'm going to be making more Shining content, as well as my Eyes Wide Shut Part 3 will be coming out soon. If you like my content, please hit like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell on your way out. I also have a TikTok profile that you can go check out. I have over 1,000 videos posted over there. And please drop a comment letting me know below what you think of this video, as well as The Shining, the movie and the book, and what you want to see next on the channel. I want to thank you all so much for joining me. My name is Jacob DeSayo, and I will see you in the next video.